Alright, I'm getting ready to develop a roll of film. I have here a roll of Neopan 400 Fujifilm that I'm going to develop. I have here some Rodinal one-shot developer. Stop bath, fixer, wash, and a wetting agent. So these are just to go over all the things you need to develop some film at home. You need some exposed film, for one. Now, the exposed film does need to be transferred into a developing tank. So this is what a developing tank looks like. So, I'm going to load this guy onto the reel, put it on here into the developing tank. It has a lid that's specifically designed to make sure no light gets into the developing tank, and it has an agitation stick. So this is the only part that needs to be done in complete darkness. If you have a dark enough bathroom, you can do it in there. If you have a dark enough, like a closet or something, you can do it in there. I'm going to do it inside of a dark bag. Now, because I shot this in an older camera, it did me the great favor of leaving a piece of the film out of the canister itself. If you have a camera that rewinds it all the way in, you will have to actually pry this thing open, pry it apart. But in my case, I don't have to. I'm just going to cut myself a nice straight edge here that I can use to load it onto here. So I'm going to go into my dark bag. So I need the tank, I need the reel, and I need the two parts that make it light proof. And I need these two. And this bag is really just black vinyl with a double zipper and some armholes. Alright, so the first thing I'm doing right now is pulling all the film out of the canister, making sure that I roll it up nicely. Don't just have it dangling all over the inside of the bag, because I don't want to scratch it either. And once I get to the end, I'm going to very carefully cut it away from the canister. Now what I'm doing is putting it into the first groove on my reel. Oops. I didn't do a very good job of that. There's a pair of ball bearings on the reel that you have to get the negative past. And then you should be able to just twist it. There we go. getting close to the end of it. So putting in the center post, putting it into the tank, making sure the lid is safely on there. And that is it. That's literally the only part of this that needs to be done in the dark. And then you're left with your canister. Okay, so the film's already in here, which means I could start the developing. But one step that's kind of optional that I always make a point of doing is to rinse the negatives first. So I just give them a quick rinse. I don't know if you can tell from there, I actually made like a hose that I can attach to my kitchen sink when I'm developing film, just to make it easier. So I washed it, I gave it a quick wash. So the first step is the developer. So for the developer, I need my water that I've already made sure is at exactly 20 degrees Celsius. This is a 1 to 25 dilution. So in order to get up to 500 milliliters, I need 20 milliliters of this. Make sure you rinse everything when you're done, just to avoid any contamination of chemicals. So that was 20 milliliters of liquid, of the chemicals. Now I just need to bring this up to 500. Oh, sorry, 520. So how did I know the dilution and the time? It's actually all right on the bottle. So I'm using a 1 plus 25 dilution. And I've got a cell phone, I've got my backup burner phone over here set up with a timer. And I'm going to develop this for 6 minutes. I'm going to start the timer as soon as I know the chemical's getting up to where it's reaching the film. So during the 6 minutes of developing, every minute, I'm going to give it about 10 seconds of agitation using the little agitator stick that this comes with. I'll do the first full minute. Or at least 30 seconds. And the reason you agitate as you go is just to make sure that you're moving the chemicals around. The developer will become exhausted, and you want to keep refreshing the chemical process against the negative. So just give it some agitation from time to time. So that was about the first minute. You can also use more old school steel development tanks. That's a 120 reel for bigger film, but these are a little bit harder to load the film onto. You don't just twist it like you do the plastic ones. And they also don't have a simple agitation stick to make your life easy. So with these, what you would do is actually just give it a few inversions every minute. Maybe give it kind of a little swirly action every minute. When you're doing full inversion, at least this is what I was taught in school, you want to give it a little tap when you set it down just to make sure any bubbles that you created rise to the top. Luckily, it's all avoided with a plastic tank. So you really just need to do that for about 10 seconds every minute. And while this is happening, we can prepare the next step. So the next step is the stop bath. This chemical's job is literally to stop the chemical reaction that the developer started. Some people will just use water. They'll just swish the negative out with water. I prefer to actually use a chemical stop bath. This one, again, the bottle gives you very simple directions on how much to dilute. Because I did this the other day, I already have some. And the nice thing about stop bath is you can reuse it a few times. So I already have some mixed that I'll use. You can't do that with most developers. Most developers start to go bad as soon as they've been mixed, so you don't want to keep reusing them. But stop bath and fixer, you can use it a few times. If you think it's starting to go bad, you can just increase the amount of time you use it or make a fresh batch at that point. Which means another couple things to add to your shopping list are a couple bottles to save the stop bath and the fixer, which you can reuse, and you'll need a funnel to get your chemicals in there without making a mess. I use my shop apron and a towel on my kitchen counter just to make sure that I can find any spills that I can clean thoroughly. And even if I don't spill anything, I am super careful about cleaning this area up really well before I do anything food related. I worked in photo labs for many years, and OSHA would have been livid at me doing this in a kitchen. But since we're quarantined, and I still shoot in quarantine, the labs are closed, the shops are closed. Or if you just want to learn to do this just to save some money, it's not a bad skill to have. I've ordered some color chemistry. Luckily, Freestyle is still shipping. And I have a couple rolls of color film that I'll develop maybe next week. Cool thing about color, so one thing I forgot to mention with the film, the developing time, with the 6 minutes I'm developing this, is based off of the time that I got from the actual box that this came in. There's charts online. There's a chart and an app that I use called the Massive Development Chart. Also tells you, depending on the film and depending on the chemistry, how long the development time should be. The developer sometimes has it right on the bottle, how long the development time should be. It does seem a little if it seems wasteful to you, and it is, that I'm only developing one roll in here, that's because the other roll of film I had was different, and they had different development times, so I couldn't process them together. With color, regardless of the film, the cool thing about it is that you can develop them all. They all develop in 3.5 minutes. So my time is running out here, so I'm going to dump this developer out. And I do use a little bit of water right after the developer. But then I'm going to pour my stop bath in. So the stop bath only goes in for a minute, and you pretty much agitate the whole time. Because what we're doing now is making sure that no part of the negative is still developing. So we really have to wash the developer off of there. So that was a minute with the stop bath. I can pour this back in here now so that I can reuse it. Now we do the fixer. Most fixers will want you to fix for about 5 minutes. You can safely fix for maybe up to 8-9 minutes. If at the end of this process you find your negatives look kind of pinkish or purplish, it means they need to be fixed again. The cool thing is you can finish this entire process, get all the way till you're ready to hang up your negatives to dry, and still go back and fix them a little bit longer. So just to be on the safe side, I always fix kind of an extra minute. I fix for about 6.5 minutes. And just like the developer, you agitate every 30, for the full first 30 seconds, and then for about 10 seconds every minute after that. And again, the agitation is just to make sure you're putting fresh chemistry against the negatives. Alright, that's the first minute in the fixer. So I'm using Ilford Rapid Fix for this. So what I can do while I wait for this to fix is I can prep the next batch of chemicals I need to use, which is the Hypo eliminator Archival Wash, or Hypo Clear, depending on the brand that you buy. It'll have different names. What this does is washes off the fixer to make sure there's no fixer left behind that could deteriorate the quality of the negatives over time. Just like the others, it tells you right on the bottle how much to dilute. This is a 1:43. My little notebook that I keep in with my darkroom supplies, I like to write down ahead of time all the measurements for dilution so I can just quickly do it. So, because I'm using less, I'm not even using this full tank, all I need are 10 milliliters of this. To make my life easy, I actually use an app called the Massive Development Chart, and it gives you, you plug in what developer you're using, what film you're doing. It'll calculate all your times and give you separate timers for each one, and it even tells you when it's time to agitate. So this makes the whole process super easy. Hypo clear is mixed already. So I'm coming up on 5 minutes in the fixer, but like I said, I usually get purple negatives or purplish negatives when it's only 5 minutes, so I'm going to give it an extra minute. I'm going to pour the fixer out of here. Alright, here's the cool part. The fixer is what allows the negative to be visible in the light. So you should be able to, at this point, see whether you've got a nicely exposed roll of film. Look at that. It's like magic. So now that I know this negative looks good, I'm just going to go ahead and finish washing it. I usually try to resist the urge to look at it at this stage because putting it back on the reel is not the easiest. So, the next step is the Hypo Clear. This washes the fixer off of the negatives. And I'll do this part with the lid off so you can actually see what you're looking at. The Hypo Clear, you're just going to do this for about 2 minutes. Agitate the first full minute. I'm actually kind of surprised the negative looked as good as it did, because this is a super, super expired roll of film. They haven't made Neopan 400 in a long time, and I stocked up on it about that long ago. So the next step after the Hypo Clear is to wash the negatives. You're supposed to keep running water going on it for about 10 minutes. I don't do it that long. I try to, instead of just letting the water run, I try to do a lot of agitation and switching out the water to try to get the wash done a little bit faster. Alright, so that was 2 minutes with the Hypo Clear. So like I mentioned, I actually bought a little fitting and a piece of hose for my sink so that I could do this a little more easily. But what I do is I flip this so that I can put the hose directly into the center post in there, and just have the water go down and then up through the negative. Kind of simulates the negative washers you would buy in a store. So if you're letting the water run passively over the negatives like this, it's supposed to take about 10 minutes, or you're supposed to leave it for about 10 minutes. I don't like to just waste that much water, so I try to use the agitation and the dumping to kind of minimize the water use. So it's a little bit more active washing. basically, instead of a very passive 10-minute wash, I just give it a very aggressive 5-minute wash. Our final step is the wetting agent, the photo flow. This is kind of a soapy substance that keeps us from getting streaks on our negatives. Now this is a 1 to 200 dilution, which means it's very little. So I don't even bother measuring it out. I just go for a tiny drip. If you agitate this one too much, it'll get too soapy and you'll have a bunch of bubbles to deal with. So I just do like a couple dips. And that should be enough. So now I have to hang this to dry. And we're done developing. So I used these Kim wipes, the Kim Tech wipes. They're lint-free wipes. So all we have to do now, is take our film off the reel. And just with 2 fingers, gently pull the negatives through. If there's a lot of water, you can definitely do it a second time. And then what I do is I leave the tissue on either end just to make it easier to hang up. And I'll flip you around to where I hang my negatives. So I have this kind of wire thing that puts the wire a good maybe half an inch or an inch away from the wall. It comes with these little clips, but I rather use clothespins. And then what I do at the end is I put clothespins at the bottom too. That keeps it from curling. and it also keeps it from touching the wall. And thanks. I guess tomorrow we have some scanning to do.